Embedded lighting, the future of integrating lighting into architectural materials. This is an AIA continuing education credit course presented by Cima. First, what do we mean by embedded lighting? Well, with LED lighting technology, we have the opportunity to fuse light into architectural surfaces. But this brings up the challenge of how will designers use this new capability? How will this change architectural design and architectural lighting paradigms? So let's first look at the historical context behind embedded lighting. Traditionally, architectural lighting systems have been thought of as hot, dangerous, objectified things that cast light onto sort of dumb lumps of architecture, whether that was sandstone or concrete or gypsum wallboard. The architecture itself was never really considered an active illumination source. There has been, though, a latent desire for architects to treat light as a more fundamental building material, whether that's back in the days of cathedrals with beautiful stained glass or Le Corbusier's Chapel, where he integrated niches that transcended somehow windows and became a glowing surface. Mid-century modern architects wanted a new style of luminosity. They wanted their architectural surfaces to be luminous, to retain a sort of sumptuous material quality without resorting to classical ornamentation. With modern LED technology, though, we truly can start to think of light as an actual material, and it changes the way we can conceive of architectural materials and surfaces. Let's look now at some of the design fundamentals that will help guide us into embedded lighting. Richard Kelly was a famous lighting designer in the mid-century. He indeed worked with Mies van der Rohe and Philip Johnson, and he espoused that there was three types of lighting: focal glow, ambient luminescence, and play of brilliance. Focal glow is generally the most common type of lighting in modern architecture, where you have an object that is either highlighted in light or the object itself is glowing, such as a decorative pendant or chandelier. Ambient luminescence is the light that surrounds us. It's the soft, volumetric light that fills spaces, whether that's generated from glowing surfaces, such as large windows, or indirect illumination, such as wall washing or ceiling uplighting. Richard Kelly had an especially beautiful concept for what he called the play of brilliance. To quote Kelly, "Play of brilliance is Times Square at night. It is the 18th century ballroom of crystal chandeliers and many candle flames. It is sunlight on a fountain or rippling brook. It is the rose window of Chartres. Play of brilliance excites the optic nerves and in turn stimulates the body and spirit, quickens the appetite, awakens curiosity, sharpens the wit." And to perhaps best demonstrate what Richard Kelly meant by play of brilliance is an excellent example from Jason Bruges' studio. This is an Aston Martin dealership where when you go to pick up your new car, you're escorted into a completely pitch black room, and there's this magnificent reveal of sparkling light that reveals the shape of the car. And what's interesting about this design is that it breaks nearly every typical rule of architectural lighting. If we think about most commercial office lighting, the goal of the lighting is to create a sort of endless uniformity, a relentless consistency of lighting. And what happens is it creates a world where there's no focal glow, no ambient luminescence, no play of brilliance. We're just focused on horizontal task lighting, and it just creates these miserable environments that are very inhumane. And we need to think about what our goals as designers are. And I love to refer to this quote from Maya Angelou: "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." So when thinking about embedded lighting, let's think about how architects and interior designers and lighting designers use light to create evocative emotions within space. In this example of a previous project I worked on, we were looking at hospitality applications, and we asked ourselves, how do we create a sense of romance with embedded lighting? And we said, well, people love candlelight. What aspects of candlelight do they love? Well, they love the soft animation or the flicker of the candle flame. They love the sparkle coming off the glass surround. They love the golden warmth of the light. So we took those key properties and we applied them into an architectural surface. Maybe your goal is to create a sense of luxury. And in this example, this is the Baccarat Hotel in New York. They took actual Baccarat crystal, turned it into a grid of lighting that is highly animated and dynamic, and then is the welcome wall in the lobby. In this next example, we were looking at a retail display for athletic shoes, and we were trying to create a sense of motion. So we used ambient luminescence, which is the white plane of light above. We used focal glow, which is the concealed undershelf lighting illuminating the shoes. And we used a play of brilliance, which are the linear lines streaking across the front of the display panels. And these lines were animated in a striking left to right, high energy composition. In this example, this was a hotel lobby, and we were saying, how do we create this sense of welcome? How do we create a transition moment from the outside world into the hotel? And here we used softly illuminated flowers that had a gentle sparkling pattern to them. This next example, we said, how do we create a sense of tranquility and distraction for anxious patients? In this case, a children's hospital where we wanted to help the kids relax. The walls had these small houses that gave off little discrete sparkles of light, almost like a game of peekaboo. So a key concept that you're starting to see here is that it's beyond just integrating lighting into wall surfaces. And in fact, there's this broader fusion in the industry right now of light, graphics, materials, and digital control. And this plays into the trends, right? We see contemporary architects are seeking to add visual richness back into their projects, but they don't want to resort to the sort of classic decorative ornamentation. Visual richness stimulates the senses, from subtle animation to dynamic animation, to create a natural feeling of activity and light. Combining luminous features and graphic patterns fused directly into the surface offers creative new design possibilities. For example, in this design, we created an almost magical effect of light emanating from behind sculptural folds built right into the surface of the architectural wall. And in this example of a showroom design concept, you can see 4 distinct styles of embedded lighting, whether that's cove lighting up on the ceiling, edge lighting on the wall, or direct view patterns or glowing planes of light. This combination of graphics, digital fabrication, digital control creates stunning new environments. So let's review the 5 characteristics of embedded light. Number 1 is the light effect itself. What is actually generating the light? Number 2 is the composition of those points of light, or the patterning of the light effect. Number 3 is the material. What is the material expressions and properties of the surface, whether that's the light source itself or the area in between the light? Number 4 is the animation. What dynamic properties will you add to that wall surface? And number 5 is the interactivity. Does that wall surface respond to people or data in the space itself? Let's look in depth a little bit at light effect. So as a designer, you have many choices in selecting a light effect. You can think about the geometry of it. Is it points, lines, planes, a graphic pattern? What is the optic? Is it brilliant or diffused? The shape, is it inset, flush, or protruding from the wall surfaces? Is there sculptural relief to it? Is there a silhouette? We showed some examples, for example, the butterfly pattern of a direct view or indirect view where there is shadow play, and the color of the light source itself. What is the color system? Is it a golden warm white? Is it a cool white? Or is it a RGB color changing unit? Is it fixed or is it dynamic? Under the composition or patterning of the light source itself, you can think of the resolution as in the number of individual pixels of light or points of light that you may have. The density, what is the size and spacing of those pixels? What is the visual field? What is the style of the pixels and what surrounds them? The structure, are the pixels flat or dimensional? What are they mounted to? What is their order? And the graphic arrangement, is it scaled, flowing, repetitive, deforming? It's really more of a graphic illustration art. I think it's important to note that these patterns themselves can become iconic. This is just a still shot from Stanley Kubrick's 2001, and I think it is very iconic. The next image here is the classic Star Wars, where you can instantly recognize the Empire through that pattern of light in the background of the set. The material expression of these walls becomes interesting because you are fusing the ephemeral magic of the light plus the tactility of material, right? And this creates a whole new range of sort of surface expressions, right? You have the classic forms of interior design of contrast and texture and tactility and color, but when you add light to it, it adds something more magical to that. For example, let's look at the Shanghai Museum of Glass, where they used a series of back-painted glass, which is stenciled out black, and the letters are allowed to shine through white, and the words themselves fade in and out, creating a pleasant animation across the facade. In this retail example, we have a Korean wall that is smooth on the front face, but was milled from behind to various levels of opacity to create the graphic pattern that you see. In the next example here, we have a sort of extreme example of sparkle and contrast, where we have LEDs mounted on invisible conductors directly to glass. So here, if you think the pixels themselves are brilliant, almost infinitesimally small points of light sitting in a clear substrate. Now let's look at animation. Dynamic animation of embedded lighting brings rich creative opportunities to architectural spaces. Humans are naturally attracted by movement in our visual system. It creates pleasurable visual sensations, and animation at a certain level makes us feel comfortable. It makes a space feel more natural and attractive. And I found this quote from an anthropologist that I think explains what's going on here better than almost any scientific explanation I've seen. And to quote her, "I suspect that the shimmer of light on water echoes what is going on inside our heads. This constant neurological fizz or shimmering of thoughts might remind us of the mesmerizing effect of sitting beside a glittering body of water, watching the light sparkle on the surface, its powerful, mesmerizing, or hypnotic effects." And I think that there's something very true there. For example, imagine sitting in a beautiful hammock under big trees on a beautiful sunny day. The dappled light that comes through those leaves is quite pleasing. It's not distracting. It's somehow invigorating us. It's helping you read that book and engage in your environment in a beautiful sort of subconscious level. However, animation can provide more directed results. In this case, this is Jason Bruges' studio at a children's hospital. And the problem here is that children are going for MRI scans. These are very sick kids. They're very nervous. They're very worried. It's a very intimidating environment. And that actually hurts the quality of the MRI scans. Many times that makes them have to go back again for a second scan. So in this case, they put some simple LED screens installed in the wall, hiding behind the wallpaper, and there's these beautiful little simple animated animals that come up. So when children are walking down the hall towards their MRI scan, they're distracted by these animals, and there's a sense of delight there, and it helps reduce their anxiety, and it actually improves the medical results of the scans. Now, when we have a space that's surrounded by dynamic embedded lighting, we can add a layer of interactivity to that space, right? Now, how can you do that? Well, you can touch a surface. We can sense your proximity to a surface. We can sense if a room is occupied. We can track people actively in the room and their position within that room. And we can track identity if it is opted in. But why? What's the point of it? Why would we add that level of responsiveness into a space? What kind of interactions are meaningful in architecture? Well, we can deliver function, which is the right light at the right place at the right time. Or we could deliver delight, which is consciously trying to create new memories and battle that sort of compression of memories that we all experience when we do things repetitively. Or we can deliver content. We can treat architecture as a portal to the digital world and provide ambient communications and other forms of interactivity with data sets. Moving on to our next section, let's talk about how designers could incorporate embedded lighting right now into their projects. The first concept that's really important is what we call the dematerialization of lamps. Now, if you're used to the traditional light sources, such as track fixtures or downlights or troughers, the old light sources themselves were very, very large. And now with LED lighting, we have chips that are down to less than a fraction of a millimeter in size. So it's turned lighting almost into grains of dust that can be distributed in any shape or format that you need. Right now, there's been this popular trend of LED tape strips and LED sheets, where literally lighting has become this totally pliable, flexible medium. But just a word of warning, those materials still need to be incorporated into architecture. So somehow they have to be built into frames or millwork or light fixtures, and they have to be incorporated into the surface itself. One of the easiest ways for architects to start incorporating embedded lighting directly into their projects is this use of sign boxes or backlit illuminated surfaces. These boxes typically have an aluminum frame with some sort of stretched fabric front on them and a printed graphic or a plain white surface. The results can be dramatic, such as this example here, where you have a 3-meter wide, 5-meter long, continuous, seamless plane of light, or these other examples where you have this very simple, seamless, edgeless plane of light incorporated with track fixtures to create the focal glow in between. Despite how simple they apparently are, the potential impact on architecture is incredible. For example, this is Chasing. This is a men's clothing store in Amsterdam. And it's an incredibly small, constricted space, rather bizarrely proportioned with very tall ceilings. And they maximize that by using this collage of imagery, and each light box is set at a different depth across the surface, really creating a very, very memorable retail space. Also, these light boxes can be scaled quite readily up to complete architectural wall surfaces. And with the incorporation of digital printed graphics on them, it's a quick, easy way to give you a bright, luminous pop within architectural spaces. Another easy access point into embedded lighting are these rigid sheets that are edge-lit with LEDs discreetly concealed in frames, and it creates these smooth, uniform, even planes of light. For example, there's a lot of 2x2 or 2x4 LED panels that are being created for the ceiling systems. We can take these simple planes of light and add decorative silhouette cut faces to them in a variety of different materials, quickly dressing up any wall surface with a beautiful luminosity and visual richness. But this could also be incorporated into millwork or shop fitting solutions, such as this example here, where we incorporated glowing shelves that are actually solid blocks of acrylic that were gently frosted on the outside with a line of LEDs illuminating them from inside the panel. The panels themselves have backlit LEDs going through small pinpoint apertures that create a play of brilliance or a sparkling effect to draw attention to the merchandise. Another easy and rather stock way to incorporate creative embedded lighting into large-scale architectural projects comes from the signage world, where there is this plethora of wildly creative channel letter technologies out there, and they are available in any form or shape that you want, in large variety of scales. And these can be easily incorporated into compositions that form entire ceilings, whether that's on solid surface or open ceiling conditions, and they can be highly customized to whatever the project requires. So now let's jump ahead a bit and speculate on what the future holds for embedded lighting and this fusion of lighting and signage and graphics into architectural surfaces. In 1999, I took a fantastic studio with Sheila Kennedy, who is a Boston architect, and we explored how luminous materials would be incorporated into architectural surfaces. And at that time, she had this fantastic quote that has really inspired me for many years. And she was talking about the integration of energy harvesting, sensing, control, and illumination into a single, flexible, high-volume, eco-friendly material. Now, in 1999, that seemed like absolute science fiction, but we now have the technologies to make this real. We can actually treat light in any form factor we want, whether it's a thin sheet or a completely curvable, twistable line of light, or however you need it. We can do this with LED lighting. So where does it go from there? Now that we can create light in any physical format that we need, what do we do next with it? How do we use it to engage occupants more? How do we use it to impact their health more? How do we control flow through space more? There's a myriad of ways that designers can use lighting in a far more active method than ever possible before. For example, let's look at the combination of light as a material plus healthy light plus the trends in building information modeling, parametric design, and digital fabrication. So you probably have heard by now that blue light is critical for controlling our human circadian rhythm, right? We humans have photoreceptors in our eyes that need a cycle of blue light throughout the day to keep us healthy, right? We need blue light in the morning and the middle of the day to wake us up, and we need the lack of blue light at night to help us fall asleep. This dawn to dusk cycle is profound and certainly is the most visible way we impact architectural design, particularly incorporating daylighting into our designs. But I also will challenge you to say that light impacts us in many other ways just beyond blue light in our eyes. There are many research programs going on that look at how the various wavelengths of light impact not only our eyes, but our skin and many aspects of our body. So how can we use this new precision offered designers through embedding lighting directly into architectural surfaces to impact these key health and wellness aspects? So let me offer this example. This is a newborn baby who is receiving what's called light therapy. And this is a condition known as baby jaundice, where a child is born and has too much bilirubin, or it's a pigment in their blood. And it is not a dangerous condition if treated with a dose of blue light. The blue light penetrates through the skin and breaks down the bilirubin, the pigment, which is then safely excreted through the body. But this is a very good example of the difference between a lighting specification and a lighting design. So in this case, we have these poor newborn infants. They need light therapy. So what do? We rip the child out of mom's hands, we blindfold the child, and we put it under a lamp that looks like the heat lamp at a fast food restaurant, and we leave them there for a day. So this is obviously not a very nice way of doing it. And a few years ago, some researchers at Philips Research used this combination of e-textiles, where the LEDs were actually put onto conductive threads in fabric, and created a baby Snuggie that wraps the child in blue light. So now when babies need blue light therapy, they're put into the Snuggie, and mom gets to hold the baby, and baby gets comforted and stays happy while it receives its blue light dose. And I was wondering, well, what is the equivalent of that in architecture? Well, we are surrounding people in walls, and we are now surrounding people in walls of light. So how will that look? How will that act? How can we use the luminous surfaces that surround us to ensure that we all stay healthy as we find more and more of these impacts of light on our biological health? This is an example from design group Electroland. It's the DirecTV headquarters, which was a decorative insertion into a corporate office lobby. And, this is a lot of blue light surrounding people. It looks almost like a gigantic baby Snuggie. But it also incorporates low-resolution data. It incorporates digital media onto it, and it creates quite a stunning composition. And if you go to Electroland's website, you can see they offer a complete behind-the-scenes on how they developed this using modern parametric design and digital fabrication tools. And behind the scenes, you can see how complicated this was. But this was using almost over decade-old technology. They had to use parametric design to figure out the wiring. They had to have large rooms filled with power supplies. And the future for this is all of this stuff goes away and it just gets shrunk down to a architectural material, right? And it creates a very powerful example of how designers will be using not only light, but digital content to drive how we create modern spaces. Another key trend that is driving a lot of awareness about the blue light cycle in buildings is the WELL building standard. And I won't go into a deep dive on the WELL lighting requirements here because that is worth a session in and of itself. But effectively, what WELL wants is you to have a certain amount of melanopic lighting, which is lighting that is rich in blue light, shining into your eyes at the required amounts at the required time of day. Right? This is simulating being outside in a daylit environment where you have a certain amount of vertical luminance shining at your face and into your eyes, right? There are challenges, though, with this. There is an inherent contradiction, of course, between shining bright light into someone's eyes so that they get the correct light therapy they need versus controlling glare in the environment, right? So if you are in an outdoor environment, the surrounding daylight is 10,000 lux, whereas indoors, you're lucky if it's a few hundred lux. So that creates fundamental brightness and contrast problems, which create glare between the light sources and the perceived surfaces around the environment. So I think this is a very interesting space for designers to consider. What is the future of office environments, of work environments, where we need a large amount of brightness surrounding us so that we get the proper melanopic lighting into our eyes without creating harsh contrast in the spaces between dark surfaces or unlit architectural surfaces. I think you are going to see in the future there are tremendous opportunities for creative ways of solving this challenge. Along these lines, there's also a key concept here that many real estate developments are looking for views, right? That's often driving the glazing requirements for buildings. But what's actually, I think, psychologically driving that is the need to feel connected to the outdoor space. And now with these embedded lighting tricks, we can create large glowing surfaces. And if it's detailed properly and set up properly, as in this example here, it will trick the eye into believing that you are seeing daylight, right? That you have access to an outdoor wall surface with high intensity, a uniform illumination, and a rich content of blue light for you. And it is a striking difference when you move from the classic pendants that are shining down, as you see on the left, to a wall of light that looks detailed like a curtain wall cladding system. And now that we can create walls that are literally planes of light, I think architects will experience a revolution in how they conceive of spaces. This is a trade show that I saw a couple years ago in Milan, and they had these complete wall surfaces, right, where suddenly you have shelves just floating on it, and you have what looks like closet spaces completely illuminated. Imagine waking up in the morning and walking into your walk-in closet, and this is what it looks like, right? Instead of one overhead globe light kind of, softly illuminating everything with harsh shadows everywhere, you have an entire wall surface staring at you. It will clearly help you create this sense of vigor and vitality in architectural spaces. And when we incorporate digital media into our thinking here, such as these large-scale direct view LED displays that can be scaled to any size you want, we quickly cross into this realm of this virtual reality, augmented reality, or extended reality, right? We're somewhere between real life and the virtual world. We will have architectural spaces positioned between them. An excellent example of this is this concept for a supersonic jet. And in this concept, windows are very heavy and create a lot of inefficiency. And they can actually add a curving wall of OLED display screen within the aircraft and create a high-resolution view outside of the aircraft. So I challenge you to think about the impact of this on our architectural built environment. When you have wall surfaces that can match in perfect resolution the spectral output of real daylight or real environments, is there any difference anymore between looking out a window or looking into a digital display? There functionally isn't. It's the exact same thing psychologically in how our eyes will perceive the surface. So we have to think about, how will this change architectural surfaces? Do we need windows anymore? I mean, is that a fundamental thing that we need if we have a view out? All right. And if we have a digital surface, it can be anything we want. So how do we program that surface? What does that do to the psychological perception or usage of that space? So this is kind of the end game for embedded lighting, where we go from a single pixel of light, which would be a large white surface, to a high resolution surface where we can put any digital media on that we want. So I will leave you with this closing thought. Most architecture students are taught this very famous quote from Le Corbusier: "Architecture is the masterly, correct, and magnificent play of masses brought together in light. Our eyes are made to see forms in light. Light and shade reveal these forms." But I have to challenge you. Now that we can embed lighting into architectural surfaces, and the walls and ceilings and floors and objects that surround us emit light themselves, is this line of thinking still accurate? Is this enough? Do we need to evolve this line of thinking? I look at the work by artists such as Leo Villarreal, who transcend surfaces. Their art uses various forms of lighting, illuminated sculpture, digital media surfaces, but somehow they transcend space, they transcend time. It is no longer easy enough to think of these as masses bathed in light, right? There's something more here. There's a power, there is a presence to these walls. It is something beyond, I think, Le Corbusier could have conceived of using the technologies available in his era. And I actually think the Ronchamp-Champeau is probably the closest he could have come to conceiving of this without the technologies we have readily available today. So this concludes the AIA learning section of this program, and I thank you for your time. If you have any questions or comments and want to reach out to me, please feel free to do so at bkoerner@cimanetwork.com or look me up on LinkedIn. Thank you.